The brachial plexus is split into 5 parts, starting with the roots, then the trunks, the divisions, the cords, and finally the terminal branches, which are the long nerves going down into the arm. You can remember this order by the mnemonic, real Tennesseans drink cold beer for branches. As a note, this diagram is working with a left side. So starting with the roots, we're going to start by drawing 5 different roots, 2 of which come together at the top and 2 come together at the bottom. The roots are going to be named for the spinal nerves that they come from. So starting with C5, C6, C7, C8, and then T1, the first thoracic nerve. You can remember this pattern by remembering VIV, because that's what they look like if you turn your head sideways. So after our roots, we have come together to form 3 trunks. C5 and C6 come together. This forms the superior trunk because it is the most superior. C7 just continues along, so we just rename it to the middle trunk, and then C8 and T1 come together to form the inferior trunk. After that, we've moved into the divisions, where each trunk splits into 2. So starting first in blue here, we draw 3 divisions, 1 from each trunk. These all come together to one single point in the middle. And then in red, we have the other division from each trunk, forming a different pattern. You can remember the pattern of the divisions by remembering the term strike over spare, because in bowling, a strike looks like an X, and a spare looks like a dashed line. So our 3 blue lines here are all going to be posterior divisions. Each trunk has its own posterior division. Similarly, all of our red lines here are anterior divisions. So each of the trunks has both an anterior division and a posterior division. So we've recombined back to 3 structures, which are the cords. There's only 3, but now the naming is coming from the fact that they are positioned around the axillary artery. So in blue, we're running posterior to the artery, so this is the posterior cord. That bottom one is on the medial side, so it's the medial cord. And on the top here is on the lateral side, because it's the left arm, and so that is the lateral cord. After that, we're moving into the terminal branches. So our terminal branches here form a kind of funky pattern. What we're going to do is draw a sideways M with another line coming off that middle point of the M. So that's 3 of my branches coming from the lateral and medial cords. And then the posterior cord splits into 2 branches. I'm drawing them in light blue just to differentiate them so you don't get them mixed up. So we have 5 total terminal branches. The posterior cord, the more lateral branch, will be the axillary nerve. The more medial branch and more posterior will be radial nerve. And then coming from the lateral cord, first is musculocutaneous nerve. The lateral cord and medial cord come together to form the median nerve. And note that it is median with an N for the nerve and medial with an L for the cord. And then finally, the last branch off of the medial cord is the ulnar nerve. So to orient on the brachial plexus, you can look at the divisions for that strike over spare pattern, or you can look at the terminal branches to find the shape that looks like an M. When you're trying to orient in the body, you can use the clavicle as a landmark. So the roots, trunks, and divisions are all superior or medial to the clavicle. And this is what we call the supraclavicular region. And the cords and the terminal branches are below the clavicle, so we call that infraclavicular. Our very last step is to add on the small nerves that are also coming off of the brachial plexus. So starting in the roots, we have 2 nerves. The first comes directly off of the C5 root. The second is coming off C5, C6, and C7, and then drops kind of behind the roots. So you can see how I've kind of dashed it to make it look apparent. So the C5 root is the dorsal scapular nerve. It's typically C5. It sometimes includes the C4 root. And then our long thoracic nerve, because it's long, is the nerve that is coming off the C5, C6, and C7 roots. Moving on to the trunks, we have 2 nerves coming off of the superior trunk. Our first nerve here is the suprascapular nerve, and the second is the subclavian nerve, also sometimes called nerve to subclavius. There are no branches coming off the divisions, so we go straight to the cords, where we have 1 branch off of the lateral cord, 3 off the posterior cord, and 3 off of the medial cord. Off of the lateral cord is the lateral pectoral nerve. Off of the posterior cord, First and last are the subscapular nerves. So we have upper subscapular and the lower subscapular nerves. And in the middle there, we have this thoracodorsal nerve. Finally, off of the medial cord, our first nerve here is the medial pectoral nerve. So you can see that the two pectoral nerves are named for the cords that they come from. And then our last two nerves are both cutaneous nerves, so they have these long names. First, we have the medial brachial cutaneous nerve, sometimes called the medial cutaneous nerve of the arm. And last is the medial antebrachial cutaneous nerve, sometimes called the medial cutaneous nerve of the forearm. And that is the entire brachial plexus.